Okay. This is really interesting because we may get a special guest. That's a distinct possibility. Um, I'm trying to figure out how to get my brother on here through Video Ninja so that we can so that he can come on. Now, I've got a great story to tell about that, but I'm going to try and save it in the event that he shows up. But I can't get this Video Ninja thing to work, so maybe somebody out there who's smarter than me can make that happen. In the meantime, let me get rid of this. Doink. And you guys don't need to see my inbox. Thank you very much. And we'll go live on the TikTok machine as well. Just gonna get rid of some stuff here. Kamala to oppose. Should I have done this? Yes, should I have done this? Of course I should have. Um, but what are you gonna do? This episode, oh my god, this episode is going to be the let's eliminate the corporate tax episode. It's going to be very unpopular, but that's okay. I don't care. I'm not here to be popular, as you could tell by the number of followers I have. Followers, subscribers, whatever the case may be. Let's open this up here. Get Studio open, just so I can see what the heck is going on. Um, anyway, it's fascinating stuff. I'll tell you. Let's blow this thing up here. Is that how this works? No. I don't know how any of this stuff works. I'll tell you what, I have the jumbo for that stuff. Anyway, I'm here to tell you that we need to eliminate the corporate tax. It's going to be an incredibly unpopular thing to say. But nevertheless, it is true. And I'm going to bring up a story that kind of illustrates the point as to why we need to eliminate the corporate tax. The corporate tax um, needs to go away. I'm getting a comment in my chat here saying that I'm glad you recovered from neoconservatism. Boy, it's been a long time since I was a neoconservative. That was post my service in the military in 2003. I am a recovered neoconservative. I'm living, I'm in South Carolina. And it's very interesting. I would expect that more of the libertarians here in South Carolina would actually be coming to libertarianism from the right, but actually a lot of them come to libertarianism from the left. And I'm actually surprised, to be honest with you, how many. It's surprising, and I find it enlightening how many come to libertarianism from the left, because it opens my mind to people on the left, because I tend to think as a person who came here from the right, as a person who came here from neoconservatism, that libertarian ideals align more closely with the right. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that part of the reason that I think that is because the new left in this country, the new left, I don't want to call it the far left because I think that's an overused term, but the new left in this country, or the maybe the vocal left is maybe even a better way to put that, are they have nothing in common with classic liberalism, but they in their core believe in the state and in more and more government intervention in the private economy. So I've always felt like Republicans, though they were misguided and though they do not govern in line with their quote small government beliefs, that at their core they want to be small government, that their goal, they have a desire to be small government people. They may not govern that way, but that's at their core. So if you could explain kind of the ideas and principles of liberty to them, that they would come your way, that you could win over Republicans. Small government, quote small government Republicans would be easier to win over to the cause of libertarianism than would the left, if that makes sense, right? Because the left is collectivism. It is the state. That's what they believe. And that's, I don't believe that. They believe that, and that's fine. We can have those arguments and conversations. I'm not here to argue the virtues of that at the moment. So it's great to see that people from the left, particularly kind of the classic liberal left, are finding their way to libertarianism, um, and to the principles of liberty from they're breaking free from the collectivist ideals of the left. I feel almost like the libertarianism to me is classic liberalism. And we use the term liberal to describe liberals in the United States today. That's not who they are. They're not classic liberals by any stretch of the imagination. Um, I just got news from my brother that he is not going to be joining the live. So we'll just move on with a normal political conversation. He's not much into politics anyway. So it's good to see people from both sides moving, being able to draw from both sides and not just one side. Because I think if you don't have, I enjoy my conversation with libertarians who come here from the left because I think they help me understand the left better. You're a recovering neoconservative. It's very easy. I understand how neoconservatives think. I understand that mindset, but I don't really understand the mindset of the collectivist, of the left, of the modern day leftist. So talking to them helps me to understand them better. And that's a good thing, right? Understanding is a good thing. Understanding where people are coming from is important. So anyway, boy, all that to say, all that to say that, hey, yeah, I'm a recovering neoconservative. It's been a long time. And I'm here to talk about eliminating the corporate tax rate, which is going to be super popular on this particular, it's to be super, super popular on this particular platform, really in social media in general. When we talk about the corporate tax rate, I mean, we are arguing about, this is one of them, to me, it's one of the things that most obviously makes it most obvious that the two parties are incredibly similar to each other. And that is that neither of them will touch the idea of eliminating the corporate tax rate, which is the most logical economic move in a globally competitive marketplace, because that's a fixed cost of operating or in every location, at every spot. And if your goal is to bring American jobs back to the United States, then you want to have the most competitive business environment in the world. So we've got good infrastructure, we've got cheap energy, but we have very expensive labor. We have a strong regulatory environment, stronger than most. So we have heavy regulation and high labor costs in the United States. So if you want to compete with the global marketplace for labor or for work to employ your people, then the only way we're really going to be able to attack this, honestly, is from a corporate tax rate perspective. And the reason, so a lot of people are going to oppose that. A lot of people are going to say corporations need to pay their share. Corporations need to pay this, da, 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 da. Okay, a couple of different things here when it comes to corporations. First and foremost, corporations pay all the taxes. They don't just pay the corporate tax rate, they pay your taxes. Your taxes are paid out of the salary that the corporation pays you out of its profits. All taxes in the country are paid by corporations. But in a roundabout way, none of them are, because all the taxes are paid by the consumer. All the taxes are paid from the revenue generated by selling things to consumers. And so what that means is it's a pass-through expense. And I've tried to explain this to people, and I think that most libertarians understand this. Even a lot of Republicans understand it. Democrats balk at the idea that the corporate tax rate is a pass-through expense. And I find that hilarious, because this is what they'll say in opposition to that idea is that it's not a pass-through expense, because they can't simply pass you're going to love this. They can't simply pass the corporate tax on to the consumer because we're in a competitive environment. To which I will immediately say, okay, if we're in a competitive environment, then there can't be any such thing as price gouging, because we're in a competitive environment and prices are a function of supply and demand. And so we can't simply pass all this expense or all this cost or all this whatever onto the consumer. If we're in a competitive environment, how can we price gouge? I'm going to pause for station identification here. Give me a second. I just noticed I was off center with my camera. I don't like it. Okay, sorry. That is my OCD kicking, and I have to fix the. I have to fix it. I have to be directly centered on the screen, or I'll go crazy. Sorry. Anyway, you can't simply pass the corporate tax on. So, okay, then there can't be price gouging. Well, of course they can price gouge because economic reality doesn't exist if you have ideological lock, right? I will bend the rules of economics around my belief system in order to make this work, in order to make this thing that I want to believe be true. And I think that's what you get. So I'm going to bring up this story. And this is a great example. And people will get behind this is the thing. This is what gets me kind of every time, is that people will get behind this. So let me just bring this up here. And this is essentially just a story about the deal, the steel deal with Nippon buying U.S. steel. Let's get here. Move this over here. Okay, so sorry about the delay. I'm operating this on a few different platforms, so I do apologize for the delays. The 3.5 years stats show that no, that's not the one. That's not the one either. Here we go. Vice President Kamala Harris is planning to voice her opposition against Nippon Steel's pending purchase of U.S. Steel, adding another high-profile critic to the deal initially reached in December. The Democratic presidential candidate is visiting Pittsburgh for the Labor Day holiday and is expected to say at an event that U.S. Steel should remain domestically owned and operated. According to a Harris campaign official, her stance appears to mirror President Biden's position on the purchase. Biden in March, first of all, and if you're a libertarian viewer, you're going to say, well, this is not something that the government should be involved in the first place. If you're not a libertarian viewer, that's perfectly fine. You think that the government has a role in getting involved in this stuff. That's perfectly fine. I can argue that on its merits. But that's my take on this, is they really shouldn't have anything to do with getting involved in these kinds of deals. It has nothing to do with the federal government. Shouldn't have anything to do with this. Anyway, Biden in March signaled his opposition to the deal without explicitly saying he would block Nippon Steel's $14.1 billion purchase. Former President Republican nominee Donald Trump has said he would stop the deal if he wins a second term. So, by the way, if you don't like my little screen here, where I am saying that the two parties are the same, I would just let me reread that to you, because this is exactly encapsulates what I'm talking about here. Both political parties want to intervene and stop this deal from happening. The lead candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, sitting on massively, according to the general population anyway, they are way apart in terms of how an economy should function and what the government's role is. They couldn't be more different. They're the same person. And neither of them is saying we should eliminate the corporate tax. And of course, we absolutely should, if we believe in bringing U.S. jobs back to the United States. But I just think it's funny that Trump and Harris are on the. It's funny, like you can hear them argue about things, but at the end of the day, when it gets down to it, it really does get difficult to determine where exactly their economic differences lie. Biden March signals his opposition to the deal. For Republican nominee Donald Trump said he would oppose the deal if he wins. Harris weighing in on the deal comes as other parts of her campaign agenda start to take shape. She has proposed exempting tips from being taxed. And it says a proposal that Trump has also backed. Actually, she opposed this and Trump was for it. And then so he didn't also propose it. She's jumping on his bandwagon. Sorry, I don't want to give Trump too much credit here, but I mean, she's jumping on his bandwagon. This was his thing before it was her thing. But okay, I just find it kind of funny how they chose to phrase that. Harris weighing in on the deal comes as other parts of her campaign agenda start to take shape. The United Steelworkers Union has steadfastly opposed the deal with Nippon Steel, arguing the company hasn't provided sufficient commitments to keep the union-represented mills open and honor existing contract terms. Nippon Steel has said it would honor obligations under the union contract that runs through 2026. The company has also said it would refrain from layoffs through the current contract. Obviously, if Nippon Steel takes over this entity, um, they are going to lay people off in 2026. That's the plan, right? It's not a question. They're going to bring that labor or they're going to at least terminate the union contracts and make um, a more lucrative, more corporate friendly deal, right? So, what's the best way to protect these union contracts and keep this company out of the hands of Japanese steel? Hey, U.S. Steel, don't make this deal and we'll exempt you from corporate taxes forever. As a matter of fact, all U.S. based businesses will be 100% exempt from the corporate tax in the United States, which means every company based outside the United States that's doing business here will just continue to pay the normal tax rate, which means that they're already choosing to do business in the United States under the current tax structure that we have. So it's not like we're going to push them out. But if you choose to base your business in the United States, you're not going to pay any taxes. It's a hell of a lot different than a tariff, isn't it? That lowers costs for real for American consumers because it lowers the cost of doing business. It would be a windfall. It would bring in investment into this country like you would not believe. The elimination of the corporate tax. And look, you would have no choice but to massively increase immigration into this country and to start opening up federal lands to development, because the influx of capital and the desire to build in this country, companies coming into this country and investing here would be insane. The other thing that this would do is you could say there's no corporate tax breaks, right? You're not going to have a company getting a big tax break to build this, to build that. We're not going to have taxpayers build stadiums for billionaires anymore. There are not going to be any of these corporate handouts. You don't pay taxes on any of the money you make. So there are no corporate handouts. That's gone, which levels the playing field across the board for small businesses who don't get these handouts, who don't get these special dispensations to do business. That levels the playing field for them so that they're not competing with corporations where they don't have these government handouts and this government largesse assisting them. Nobody's paying taxes. And then we can start working on the regulatory environment, right? If you eliminate the corporate tax and the money that would come flooding in this country, you wouldn't even be able to, we wouldn't believe it. Capital flows where it gets the rate of highest return, period. And if we could just get behind the idea, or understand the idea, have the politicians get in front of the American people and be honest and just stop trying to sow seeds of jealousy and envy and all this other nonsense, and actually say and tell the truth and try and do what's best for the American people, then they would this is the message. Let's stop with all the nonsense about the corporations this and the corporations that. Let's see, Johnny, I'm getting a question in my chat, which is kind of weird. What's it like running for office knowing you have no chance at all? Not trying to be rude. I'm not running for office, by the way. Anyway, it's an interesting concept, right? So that's it for me. As far as the corporate tax rate and the two parties and how similar they are, we got Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, Joe Biden are all like, yeah, we can't let this deal go forward. So they both believe that the government should intervene in the private economy. None of them are talking about eliminate. They're all talking about adjusting taxes around the fringes, but not actually eliminating the corporate tax and saying here's the problem. You want to make America competitive. You want to bring jobs back to the United States. We need to eliminate the corporate tax altogether in this country. We need to be as appealing a place to invest capital as any place in the world, if not more so. Because we have higher labor and higher regulation, we have to offset that by essentially not having a corporate tax. And so to me, this goes deeper with the two political parties and how similar they are. Neither one of these parties has a comprehensive plan to fix immigration in this country at all. So when I look at the labor issue and bringing jobs back to this country, which, by the way, we have very low unemployment in the United States right now. Our problem is inflation, not employment. But so all this talk about jobs and this kind of, our issue is inflation. It's not jobs. But set that aside for a moment. their plans are very similar. Both Bush, might as well be, but Trump and Biden both talk pretty extensively about putting tariffs on Chinese goods. They both believe in this interventionist, um, you know, governmental position in the economy. Um, Neither of them has a plan to fix immigration. Trump of the candidates, Trump's the more anti-war candidate. He's not anti-war, but he is more anti-war than the Democrats at this point. So there isn't this great um, there isn't this great separation between the two political parties, and so that's what I would that's what I say to that. Um, and what's your thoughts? I'm getting a question on. So Johnny, if you're still in here, by the way, I have ran in the past, and I may run again, but I'm not running at the moment. My thoughts on the World Economic Forum. Look, at the end of the day, one of the things that bothers me probably, and if there's a reason, I would, if I absolutely there was no way out of it, I had to vote for one of the two primary parties, it would be Trump. I have to acknowledge it, and that's some of that might be some I'm willing to recognize my own kind of bias coming to libertarianism from the right, but the other thing is that he stands very much opposed to the global economic agenda. I don't necessarily agree with his domestic economic plans, but the fact that he got us out of the TPP, the fact that he got us out of the Paris Climate Accords, that he doesn't seem willing to engage with the global plan and doesn't want kind of a global influence on internal American domestic affairs, makes him to me far more appealing than his Democratic competitors. So if I had to land on one side or the other, I would have to land on the right. So I guess that's where that goes. Let's just take a peek here. Okay. So that's right. The Epstein's client list thing, I think that's getting. I'm gonna have to update this a little bit. So that's just really just sad as it is. It really is just kind of. It really is kind of just drifting into the past, where it's like, nobody's even thinking about this. So I live in South Carolina. I'm getting asked who I'm going to vote for in November. I will vote for Chase Oliver. I have deep concerns and disagreements with him. I definitely believe that he is a lot closer and understands the proper role of government in people's lives on a broad scale, though there are certainly individual issues which I disagree with him on. But more importantly, and this is going to sound bad coming from a libertarian. I live in a deep red state where the state is going for Trump. I haven't voted for Trump in either of the prior two elections. So it's not even a protest vote per se. It's no more of a protest vote than a Democrat voting for Kamala Harris in South Carolina. South Carolina is going for Donald Trump 68, 70%, right? So you could, if you're going to say I'm wasting my vote, well, then every Democrat in the state who's voting for Kamala Harris is wasting their vote as well, because she's not going to win South Carolina. So from that perspective, I don't see that my vote for Chase Oliver as a protest vote. He's the person running who most closely aligns with my own values. And I still, we're not going to get it this time around, but we got to get to 5% of the popular vote. We got to get there for the guaranteed ballot access. We got to get to 15% polling to get on the debate stage. There's ceilings that have to be broken. I don't know if we'll do it in my lifetime. But at the end of the day, I'm going to vote my conscience. And so I'm not voting for somebody that I just, there's very little about Trump that I like. I think the only thing I like is what I've said, which is he opposes the global agenda, and he did a nice job of making sure that global governance didn't really play a role in what's going on in the United States. So from that perspective, he's my guy. But overall, there isn't anybody in the two-party system that excites me all that much. Got another story I'm going to bring up here. Let's see what this one's all about. See, I went through all this trouble to set up a control room and all this stuff to try and bring my brother in here. Okay. How Trump plans to make voters hate Kamala Harris. I read the story. It's not particularly interesting. We'll blow that away. Stats show the Harris Biden administration just stopped caring if criminals cross the border. This border issue is 3.5 years of the Harris Biden administration have proven beyond dispute that legal immigration is not a victimless crime. The fact has been thrown into sharp focus with the news that an illegal alien charged with assaulting New York City police officers was caught and released at the border just last May, despite ICE beds being available. We've heard of the horrific crimes committed by illegal aliens. I don't like, it's an interesting thing when we talk about like illegal immigration. I don't like this direction. This is the rhetoric that I don't like from the right on immigration. This is what kind of irritates me, if you will, about the right. We've heard of the horrific crimes committed by illegal aliens against innocent Americans like Lake and Riley, Rachel Morin, and Jocelyn Nungare. Sorry if I'm Jocelyn Nungare. We have mourned their loss and grief for their families. We have also questioned how such terrible acts could possibly be allowed to happen in our communities at all. That is the exact same. There's no difference. Okay? No difference between that rhetoric and there's something weird going on. There's no difference between that rhetoric and the gun crime rhetoric you hear from the right whenever there's a tragedy, or from the left whenever there's a tragedy, right? If there happens to be a horrific event at a school, then you will all of a sudden, that's it. That's the talk of the town. And Republicans will come out and they'll say, well, that's a tiny percentage of gun owners, a tiny percent of gun crime. The same thing can be said for crimes committed by illegal immigrants. It's a pretty crappy way of getting the idea across that, hey, we need to enforce our border laws and we need to enforce our immigration policies, to kind of take an entire group of people people who've crossed the border illegally. They are illegal, and they have immigrated here illegal. They are illegal immigrants. I'm not going to get caught up in the semantics. That's just what they are. That's the fact of the matter. But to paint them with this broad stroke, right, is dangerous rhetoric. It's hateful, and it's stupid. There are good reasons, really good, intelligent reasons for the United States to actually defend its own borders, to actually control immigration. There's reasons that we should, there are good reasons for us to be doing that. And it doesn't have anything to do with violence. The first thing is something that should appeal to both sides here, the left and the right. And that is that you don't want to bring in, you don't want to bring in a millions of people who are going to be relegated to second-class citizen status. You don't build a cohesive society that way. So we don't want millions of people flooding across the border illegally, who are then going to be relegated to second-class citizen status. That's going to create a burden on local public works and infrastructure. It is going to push them into the shadows. It is going to increase crime. So we do want to slow the flow of illegal immigrants into the country. We have to get border security dialed in. Okay, that's step one. You can't do anything else until you get the border fixed. The next thing you need to do is to recognize that the overwhelming majority of these people are not out committing violent crimes. These are not people who are a threat to the nation. And these are not people who are just leeching off of the system. The majority of these people are, in fact, working. The majority of these people are contributing to their society, to their local communities in some meaningful way. Doesn't mean they all are. Doesn't mean there aren't significant problems because we've had too many people come across the border. Okay. But if you grant some form, get some pathway for the people who are here to be here legally, you will be able to flush out the people who are committing bad acts, because you're going to take millions of people out of the shadows, and the people who stay there are going to be a hell of a lot easier to find because it's going to be a smaller hiding spot. So you have to fix that problem internally, but first you have to fix the border. Then you have to fix what's going on inside the country. Now, I have bad news for all of the people on the right who think that they're going to be mass deportations of millions of people. We're going to be kicking down doors. That's not going to happen. And as a libertarian, it terrifies me, the idea that it would, because the expansion of police powers and surveillance on everyday Americans would have to explode. It would be an order of magnitude in line with post 9/11 expansion of the state's surveillance powers in order to try and root out and engage in millions of deportations. It's just not going to happen. Not in any way that you think it's going to happen. So you secure the borders, and you got to fix what's happening inside the country, and then you have to fix the immigration system itself. I harp on this a lot. I know the immigration system. I'm married to an immigrant. My sister-in-law immigrated here. My nephew immigrated here. I have people waiting in my family to get to this country who have been waiting over 10 years to get into this country, and they can't. They're just waiting for their visa approval. That's the waiting list, and it costs a lot of money, and it's complicated, and it takes forever. It is not easy to. People who say, well, they should just do it the legal way, don't understand how difficult that process actually is for the majority of people who want to immigrate to the United States. We need to solve that problem. The other thing we need to do is we need to stop with this idea that we don't want South America to economically develop. If China wants to build factories in Mexico and employ Mexicans so they have a good opportunity to make a living wage and support their families in Mexico, well, hey, that's how you stop. So our target is to make sure that we don't have no jobs are created in Mexico, but also nobody's allowed to immigrate. What? That doesn't make any sense. You want South America. Well, first of all, Mexico's not South America, but you want the south of our border, Mexico, Central America, and South America. You want those countries to be wealthy, well-developed, secure nations with functioning economies where there is very little motivation for people to pack up everything and leave. So that's what you need. That's what you want. So you secure the border, you take care of what's going on internally, you fix the immigration system, and you start figuring out a way to help our neighbors to the south develop economically so that there's opportunity down there, so they're not necessarily just chasing it across the border. So, yeah. And so you hear the stories, as one is popping up in my chat here about, if you can get into the country as an illegal, there's going to be, there might be a way for you to become legal. That doesn't work for Europeans. That doesn't work for people and yes, there are poor countries that aren't in our hemisphere where people would also like to get into the country. You fix the border because it's not fair, and fair is a stupid word. Nothing's fair, but it's a proximity advantage of people who are, there are plenty of people, disadvantaged people throughout the world who would love to come to the United States. You got to fix the immigration system. You got to make it easier. And look, if you make it easy to get into the country legally, hey, it's a year and pass this test. And, here's what you got to accomplish over the next year. You got to pass the citizenship exam and do these things over the course of the next 12 months, and you're in. Pass a criminal background check, pass this test, and you're in the country. And it takes a year. Well, you're going to eliminate, the people who are then sneaking into the country are coming here to do something nefarious. You're going to know that's the case because you're going to incentivize good immigrants, good people who want to come here and seek opportunity aren't going to sneak across the border. They're going to be incentivized to do it the right way because their life is going to be so much better once they're here. So you have to fix the immigration process. You got to make it easier. So those are the steps in my estimation. You got to fix the border, fix what's going on internally, partner with countries around the world to help them develop economically. And that means we're not going to sanction, we're not going to tariff, we're not going to tell China that they can't build factories in Mexico. It doesn't make any sense. Got to end the war on drugs and take the power and the wealth out of the hands of the cartels so that these South American countries that are spending, whatever percent of their GDP trying to fight these drug lords, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of things we can do to stem the tide of people who want to come to the United States. We slow that down by just taking some steps that we have the ability to do. So, yeah, I mean, I'm getting comments about, less corruption and some of the issues south of the border. And I would just say to that, Just bear in mind, if these countries are poor, they don't have the ability to police themselves. The ability to police yourself comes from wealth. The ability to keep your streets safe comes from wealth. So we're very fortunate in the United States to be wealthy, and therefore able to do these things that we feel need to be done. But not everybody has that. They don't even have that ability. And when I talk, that's what I mean when I say we need economic, from the perspective of economic development. Look, farm subsidies in the United States, particularly dairy subsidies, hurt Mexican farmers, right? So we put a bunch of Mexican dairy farmers out of business by subsidizing U.S. dairy, which, by the way, I'm originally from Wisconsin. California isn't a dairy state if it's not for milk subsidies or dairy subsidies, right? There's no reason California over the last, 30 years has grown into this milk powerhouse. They did that on the backs of taxpayer subsidies. A lot of that work would be in Mexico. You wouldn't have these migrants flooding across. So we subsidize farmers in the United States. And I know what I'm going to hear. Well, we need our farmers. We need to be able to grow food. Stop taxing farmers. Eliminate property taxes for farmers. Here, I got an idea for you. Eliminate everybody in the food production and distribution industry. If you're a trucker who moves food, right? If you're a trucker who moves food, you don't pay taxes. How about this? If you're a trucker who moves energy, you don't pay taxes. How about this? If you produce energy, a thing we need to stay alive, we don't tax it. We don't need to subsidize. Taxes and subsidies are a way for the government to pick and choose which industries they want to control. It's a way for them to sell favors. It's a way for them to raise campaign donations, right? You eliminate the corporate tax rate and you eliminate all subsidies. Both of those things disappear overnight. And you're going to have a massive readjustment of the economy. First of all, so I tend to go off in tangents as I become a more disciplined podcaster or live streamer or whatever the hell you want to call it. I'll probably be able to script out and outline what my show is going to be about a little bit better. But for now, this is what I'm doing. For one, we're not going to grow so much damn corn in this country. Get rid of ethanol mandates, by the way. We don't need to grow so much damn corn. You know how much of our agricultural capacity is dedicated to corn and how much corn actually turns into food for the American people? The numbers are actually quite astonishing. I'm gonna see if I can pull that up real quick while I'm here. I don't have a producer guy. This isn't the Joe Rogan show. So there's this, about 12% of the U.S. corn crops ends up in foods that are either consumed directly or indirectly through high fructose corn syrup. So that's part one. So how much of our agriculture? So corn is the primary U.S. feed grain. That's not what I want. How much of our farmland? How about that? Farmland is used for corn. There we go. The U.S. corn uses more land than any other crop. So here we go. These are two interesting statistics for you, right? So this is what farm subsidies, this is what government intervention in the marketplace does. In the U.S., corn uses more land than any other crop, spanning some 97 million acres, an area roughly the size of California. About 12% of the U.S. corn crop ends up in foods that are either consumed directly or indirectly through the use of high fructose corn syrup, which is terrible for you. So I want you to think about like food prices in this country right now, right? Just think about how expensive it is to go to the damn grocery store. 97 million acres of land is dedicated to a crop that only produces about 12%, only 12% of it becomes food. And a big chunk of that food is high fructose corn syrup. Now, a lot of it's used, don't get me wrong, it's used to feed cattle. But then you have to go downstream of that and say, well, what's it feeding? Well, it's feeding restaurant cattle. It's feeding fast food. The corn industry is been horrible for this country. It's been a terrible thing. And there's just no way around that. Let's see here. Anyway, so that's the deal. And nobody's talking about it. You don't have a political candidate. So I can't remember where I saw this. I think it might have been in the television show The West Wing. But you don't go, you're not going to win Iowa, right? By saying we should end corn subsidies. You're not going to win in the Midwest. You're going to lose Wisconsin. You're going to lose Minnesota. You're going to lose Iowa. You're going to lose all this farmland. These farmers are not going to vote for you. You'll lose staunchly red states, the Dakotas, whatever. I mean, it's not like it's a ton of electoral votes, but you'll lose those states. You'll lose House seats. You'll lose Senate seats if you go in there and say we need to eliminate corn subsidies. So we're in this lock. This two-party system has locked us into this thing because at the end of the day, the voters don't want to educate themselves about what's happening. That's what this really all boils down to. So we talk about like preserving democracy, and I'm like, democracy might be a little overrated, to be honest with you. Anyway, what else do I got here? I've got, I do have an upcoming, I was watching a More Perfect Union video the other day. And they talked a little bit about food. I did one on the merger of the grocery stores and how they oppose that. Dang it. They want to stop the Albertsons Kroger merger, which, by the way, would give those two entities, I think, control of 70% of the grocery market, and they're calling it a monopoly, which is ridiculous. The whole thing is it's just a bunch of lies and manipulation. Again, if you want grocery prices to go down, grocers live on a really thin margin, right? And so what's interesting here is it's like, okay, well, who exactly, if you're Kamala Harris, here we go, tangent again. If you're Kamala Harris, you're going after price gouging in the food industry, right? Okay, well, who in the food production and distribution chain is living on fat margins where you can force them to lower their prices without putting them out of business? Is it the farmers? Are the farmers price gouging? Well, nobody's gonna get on board with that. Nobody's gonna get on board with, oh, the farmers are price gouging us, and we have to pass this law to stop the farmers from price gouging. But if you look at grocers, and what the margin is for grocery stores, you're gonna say, well, these guys are barely getting, it's 1.5% to 2% margins. So if you force them to lower prices, you're pushing them out of business. It's not gonna be. It's not truckers. Truckers aren't getting fat off of shipping. Right? So who's in the food supply? If you're watching right now, hit me in the chat. Tell me who in the food production and distribution chain, when Kamala Harris says she's going to go after price gouging to lower food prices, who in that production and distribution chain is she going to be able to, like, who are we going to get here? Like who's living high off the hog in that industry? I'm sure somebody in my chat on TikTok has got to have an opinion on this. I just don't get it, and I don't know. We're going to go after price gouging, which has been very vague and non-specific because there's only a few people in that industry. You could say packers, like your Tysons, your Purdue's. I don't even think their margins are that. I know they make a lot of money as a top line number. But in terms of the margin that they're operating on, I think the margins in the food production distribution industry are pretty freaking tight. And so when she says she's going to go after price gouging, we got to show me who you got to name somebody. You can't just say we're going to force them to sell food to you for less. Who's going to sell it for less? If the farmer's going to sell it to the grocery stores for less, the trucker's going to charge less to ship it. Again, you want to make food prices in this country cheaper. You want to make everything in this country cheaper. You want to bring more jobs back to the United States. You want to solve a ton of our economic problems. As a matter of fact, you'd have so much investment in the United States that you would start low, that if you didn't go nuts and start spending a ton of money, which that would be the problem. But if you solved immigration, start bringing people into the country, and if you eliminated the corporate tax rate, the economy will grow so fast. You'd literally, the other thing you'd have to do is the federal government would have to start giving up land and opening federal lands up for development. It's the only way it would work, because you'd have so many people coming into the country and so much development happening that it would be virtually impossible to do it without opening up federal land to the process. Just eliminate the corporate tax rate. That's stop with the price gouging and the subsidies and all this other nonsense. Just eliminate the corporate tax altogether. And you won't have to raise individual income taxes because the economy will grow at such a fast pace that you won't have to worry about budgetary shortfalls. Not that you're worried about budgetary shortfalls. Anyway, we're running insanely high budget deficits. There's almost no interest in balancing the budget or even getting us on the path back to fiscal responsibility. So at the end of the day, that's your answer. See here. Yeah. So I just got a comment. This is and I'm surprised. I'm starting to get it now. It's finally starting to happen. Thanks for the follow, Richard. It's finally starting to happen where people are saying, well, Kamala's running to fix the economy, but not only is she part of the current administration, but the Democrats have been in power for 12 of the last 16 years. For 12 of the last 16 years in this country, we've had a Democrat president. So all of the issues that we're facing in the economy, look, I'm not laying all these problems at the feet of the Democrats by any stretch of the imagination. I'm laying them at the feet of, so when I try and have these conversations about both sides, right? People are, both sides are not the same and we're different. And okay, fine. What I'm saying is government is not good at stuff. Government is not good at doing things. Government is inefficient and ineffectual. It has the power of force, but at the same time, it has no incentive to perform well. There's no profit motive. It has no incentive. There's no, and so then therefore there is no special benevolence granted to government employees or government workers. There's no special benevolence granted to our elected officials who have very little power. It really is the letter agencies behind the federal and state governments who are really running the country. And those people are no more benevolent than people working in the private sector. They're not any better, but they have the power of force. They have favors to sell. And so it becomes very difficult to justify allowing government to have such heavy involvement in the economic system. And the corporate tax and subsidies are the two biggest ways. The power to tax is the power to destroy. And the power to hand out subsidies is the power to grant life to a business that should otherwise die. And that's nothing but favors. It's nothing but grift. And too much of our economy is subject to that. This isn't to say that there's some kind of benevolence in corporate America, that these are all good actors that'll do nothing but the right thing. But it's one of the naive things that libertarians say is like, in a free market economy, businesses wouldn't poison their own consumers because they'd go out of business. Well, tobacco and alcohol are entering the chat, right? Yeah, of course they would. If they can get away with it, they'll do it. There is a responsibility that comes with being a free person. You are responsible to make sure that you're making good decisions. Now, is there a limit to that? Yeah, and what I would say to that is, on the other side of that is, of course, would be a huge thirst for consumer agencies. Look, Consumer Reports is huge. Why? Because the only thing they have to sell is their integrity. Why they don't sell advertising? They are purely funded by their subscribers, right? They don't do drugs. I don't even think they're allowed to review the efficacy of drug medication. I think there's a law that prevents them from being able to do, if you can believe it. Like, what stamp would you rather have on something, an FDA stamp or a Consumer Report stamp on something you're putting into your own body? Would you rather have a stamp from Consumer Reports saying that this is a safe product, or from the FDA saying this is a safe product? In the absence of the government being able to control all these aspects of the economy, consumer agencies, private sector agencies would fill this gap. And I personally feel that they'd fill it with better integrity, because they wouldn't have the ability to just force you to pay for their services. They'd have nothing to sell you but their integrity. Whereas the FDA can tax you. The government doesn't have an incentive because they can just take the money. It's a company, just like any other company, that doesn't produce but they don't produce a product, and they take your money by force. I mean, it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's not about left versus right. It's about an entity of government that has this power of force, is made up of people who are just as fallible as people in the private sector, is not well equipped to be that heavily the market is better at doing things than the government is. It doesn't mean that the market's perfect, but granting a monopoly on force to a bunch of people who are every bit as fallible as anybody else, we all know what power does, is a terrible idea. It's a terrible way to run an economy. So let's see. So for me, that's kind of that's the big deal. That's the big issue is the overarching issue. When I talk about eliminating the corporate tax, the goal here isn't just to get rid of the corporate tax. It's to reduce government's ability to control all of our economic fates, all of them. All of our economic fate is at the behest of government. And that's an insane way to manage your economy. And it's unfortunately, it's obviously becoming like it's a global phenomenon. Right? We're all subject to governments, but it's just grown drastically out of hand. So, next time I'm here, and I haven't done this a lot, but I think next time I'm here, I am going to bring guests up on on TikTok. I don't really do that very much, but I'm going to start doing that a little bit. I think it's a good idea. Hey, bring some people up. Let's have a conversation. Why is this? Okay, get that. So I brought up my mobile preview and I can't see what's going on with my thing here. What is happening? Here we go. All right. So if you are not following me, if you're here and you're not following me and you'd like to come up, become a follower, shoot me, send me a message and let me know that you'd like to participate. Give me a topic. Tell me what your research. I'm not going to bring people up who haven't created any content or anything like that. If you're just a user with a long line of numbers after, user, whatever, prisoner 86579 or whatever, I won't bring in. But I have a lot of people who are pretty active in my comment section. So I think it's time to start bringing people up. Maybe I might just do that kind of once a week sort of a deal. But let's see. It's ironic that people are so scared of socialism. We're basically socialists for rich corporations already. Thanks for the follow there, user, and for the comment. To be honest with you, I will respond to comments. I don't care if you're a user with a string of numbers after your name or not. If you throw a comment in here it's okay. So the socialists, the collectivists, the managed economy people, socialists, communists, however you want to phrase it. Here's the deal. It's just government. Right. And I know, it's going to be stateless. Well, communism, and it'll be a stateless society. It'll be this, it'll be that. It's eliminating the market portion, which is the only thing that keeps there's a reason it doesn't work. Right. There's a reason it fails all the time. And that's because the voters don't get smarter just because they own the means of production. Right. The voters don't get any more intelligent. They will fall for the same things. And if you don't understand that the same people who are in charge of our government now would be in charge of our economy in a socialist system, then you're not paying attention. It's going to be the same people. The other problem look, I'm not one of these deep philosophy people with the dialectic materialism and negation of the negation and all this other stuff that these communists and socialists come in here and throw at me. I'm going to be the first one to admit that I'm not super well schooled in that stuff, in the deep philosophy of communism and socialism. I just understand how people function. Right. And so there's no all of a sudden we're socialist and now the voters are going to make better decisions about how to allocate resources because they own the means of production. It doesn't even make any sense. It's firing here's what it's doing. It's firing the Teslas. It's firing Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and, CEOs of major corporations. It's firing all of them and putting Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi and people like that in charge. That's it, man. That's what you're going to be doing. There's no real way around it. And so well, no. And then, so when you start talking about that, then they'll immediately start going, well, right. So you're going to have those people in control, right, of all of it. And that's worse than what we have now. What we need is, so there's two directions we can go from where we are right now. We're in this weird hybrid of a market-based slash centrally planned economy, right? And so there's a choice. You have to make a choice. You can say, okay, we're going to go towards freedom and markets, or we're going to go to central control of the economy, a planned economy. History will tell you, I think, and what happens when you get into these debates is we're going to take this little segment of history or that little segment of history. The first argument I will make for moving in the direction of the market. Okay. The first argument I'll make in moving in the direction of the market is that it's the moral thing to do. It is immoral to subjugate it's the tyranny of the masses, however you want to put it. It's the only moral way to move forward is in freedom. It's immoral to not be free. I should be able to pursue my own interests if I want to, and not have to be subjugated to some control of some masses. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's interesting that some of the questions that I'm getting from user 5588. Man, you got to go change your username. I mean, like, get a real username. Anyway, elected reps are bought by the highest bidder. Yeah, exactly. But in a free market economy, a truly free market economy, they don't have any power to do anything. Like, what? Nobody's buying elected reps unless those elected reps have the power to do them favors. That's it. That's how that works. People talk about it's this circular argument. That's why I don't try not to engage too much with communists on here. No offense, man. It's this circular argument of elected officials are corruptible and oligarchs run the country. And it's like, well, the elected officials are being corrupted by these oligarchs. Well, these oligarchs are using their wealth to buy the elected officials who the people have granted the monopoly on force to protect them from competition. It's the whole thing is insane. A market-based system is not perfect. This is the other problem with arguing with people who believe in like socialism and planned economies, is that I have to acknowledge, because I try to be intellectually honest. That doesn't mean I'm intellectually superior, intellectually correct all the time, but I try to be intellectually honest. I try to express my beliefs honestly. So I have to acknowledge that a market-based economic system is going to have a lot of injustice, a lot of unfairness. It's going to have problems. But when you argue with people who believe in a planned economy, you're arguing against like a utopian ideal. And I'm arguing for a system that is flawed but is superior. So it's really hard to make that argument, right? It's really hard to have that conversation, especially when what happens is, so I wouldn't say I'm kind of just think corporations have too much power. Small businesses doesn't exist much. Well, that's statistically, the New Deal is very socialist. And if you really read. So I'm getting questions, and I'm just going to address it because I've been going for about an hour. So now, the chat actually helps me out. Would you say the New Deal was socialist? I would say read The Forgotten Depression. That'd be a great book if you want to understand how Roosevelt extended the Depression instead of allowing it to end. The other thing I would tell you is that some of the things that happened during the New Deal are very much to blame for why our healthcare system today is as broken as it is. Roosevelt's wage and price controls in order to fight inflation, and then excluding benefits. And then there were a couple other acts that took place that essentially created, through government intervention into the marketplace, the employer-sponsored healthcare plan. That's one of the big legacies that we're living with out of the New Deal is our employer-sponsored broken healthcare system. So I would do some research on that. It's fascinating stuff. People don't really remember that history. I think healthcare in the United States looks a hell of a lot different had the government not intervened at that point. The other thing to keep in mind with the New Deal is we're also living with Social Security. You can say what you want about Social Security, and I think a lot of people, I think there are a lot of people. Social Security has a lot of defenders. Okay, granted, that's fine. But if your financial advisor handled your money, it did exactly with your money what the federal government has done with Social Security, your financial advisor would be in prison, and you wouldn't be making an argument that your kids should have to invest with the same guy so you can get your money back. Social Security is by definition a Ponzi scheme. By definition, it's a Ponzi scheme. If it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, you could allow all the young people who wanted to opt out of it right now, and all the people who put their money in would get paid because their money would still be there. So by definition, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. It's a massive unfunded liability. It's not going to be there in its current form when I'm ready to retire. Like I know that to be the case. That's a legacy of the New Deal that we're living with. But I think the biggest issue with the New Deal is that it extended the Depression. The idea that Roosevelt ended the Depression is ridiculous. It extended it. But there's a lot of things that were done to extend the Depression, and the New Deal didn't do us any favors, I guess. And Roosevelt was kind of a socialist, progressive, whatever. It is what it is. But go read up on read the Forgotten Depression. It's a fascinating book. Anyway, somebody named Go Bears just joined, and I'm a Packer fan, and I just don't know if I can keep this life going with a Bears fan in here. I really don't. They're just intolerable. Just intolerable. No offense, but Caleb Williams, has he completed what's his preseason is like 50% of his passes have been completed or something like that? Yeah. If every penny was accounted for, here's what I would say to anybody who tells you that every penny of Social Security is accounted for. For anybody who tells you that, I would just say this then, okay, then we could end the Social Security program now. Young people could opt out and not participate. And if every penny is accounted for, all the people who invested in the program would be, their money's there. It's waiting for that. There's no, how can there be a shortfall in the program? Like, it's Social Security is telling you. Like, you can go to I've gone to the Social Security website and looked at what my own benefits are going to be. I'm going to get like 80% or 70%, something like that, of what I was supposed to, of the promise of Social Security. The money's running out. There's an insolvency date built into Social Security, like it's going to become insolvent. So if every penny of Social Security anybody who tells you every penny of Social Security is accounted for, then why is there an expiration date? Go to the Social Security website, look at your own benefits, and it'll tell you on the Social Security website that you're not going to get 100% of your benefits. We're already there. I want to say it's 20. Well, I'm 48. So I'm 14 years away from, Jesus, I'm getting old, from being able to start collecting. And when I start collecting, I think it's 2034 is when they project that Social Security will not be able to meet its obligation anymore. If the trust fund was accounted for, what was the federal income tax during Wilson? I didn't look it up. Wilson was the worst. 1913 is the Federal Reserve, the income tax, and the 17th Amendment. That all happened under Wilson. He's the worst president. That was the end. That was the functional end of the United States of America under Wilson. But if every dollar of the Social Security trust fund is accounted for, then there shouldn't be any issues with the trust fund being able to meet its obligations. And that's just not the case. So anybody who tells you that is misinformed. At the very least, they're wildly misinformed. So, see what else we got going here. 6% max. So here's an interesting thing. So this user just brought up, one of the commenters here just brought up the taxes. 6% was the maximum income tax rate. This was the birth of the income tax. And if you look at the tax brackets, this is the problem with the wealth tax. I've been saying this for years, not publicly, but my wife will back me up. The money's in the middle class, and you got to get the 401k plans. You got to get the 401k plans, and you got to get home equity if you're going to keep this going, right? If you're going to keep this going without actually solving the problems. The only way to do that is you got to get home equity. You've got to get 401k plans. The wealth tax is the doorway to that happening. Okay. So if you look at the history of the income tax, if you think this wealth tax is just going to be on wealthy people, if that's what you believe, go study the history of the income tax. Okay. So the income tax was initiated to pay off war debt. It was going to be a temporary tax on people on income over $1 million a year. That was how income tax started. I just let that sink in for a second. If you aren't familiar with the history of the income tax, let that sink in for a second. And I want you to think about the wealth tax and the promise that they're making about the wealth tax. Yes, they're going to come after 401ks, which, look, income tax, by the way, 16th Amendment, Woodrow Wilson, we shouldn't be paying an income tax. I shouldn't have to invest my money in a special investment vehicle to hide it from the government so that I can keep more of it. And by the way, they'll tax it later. It's not non-taxable when it comes out. So that's taxable income when I start bringing it out. But anyway, that's besides the point. That's the plan. The plan is to get the 401ks. That's if you want to get into a grandiose conspiracy theory, the plan is to get the 401ks. Yeah, of course, libertarian. I'm so libertarian that I don't believe anybody else is an actual libertarian. Nobody tells more people that they're not really a libertarian than I do. I'm the most libertarianist. Actually, I'm a recovering neoconservative, and I still lean to the right, but I'm very libertarian in my views. I'm engaged with the local party here. But yeah, the income tax we didn't have an income tax. We had to pass a constitutional amendment in order to have an income tax. And now it's like, well, how would we even function as a nation without it? We won World War I without an income tax. We built roads and we had schools and all these things functioned. We built this nation without an income tax. And for a long time, the income tax was max rate was 6%. The idea that we need to be surrendering 30 to 40% of our income in order for the nation to function is ridiculous. If I have a business, why can't I hire whoever I want, regardless of where they come from? Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't care if a person's here illegally. If they want to work, it's an interesting thing. Like, Republicans will be angry about illegal immigrants coming here and living off the system, but then also angry that they're working because they're here to steal jobs. I'm like, I don't understand. Both those things can't be true. You can't hate both of those things. And I'm telling you, this is the thing that people don't get. Is like, do you know how much food would rot in the fields? Do you know what the collapse of the service industry would be like in the United States? I don't mean to pigeonhole, right? But if you're here illegally, you're not probably functioning as an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, even though you may be capable of it. If you're here illegally, you're probably working in the service industry, you're probably working in the construction industry, or you're probably working in agriculture. And if you suck all those people out of the economy tomorrow, the economy will probably collapse. It's an insane, and it's almost like a cognitive dissonance of like, they oppose the minimum wage, which I also oppose the minimum wage. If a business and a worker want to make an arrangement, let them make an arrangement. We don't need government involvement in this. But then you got to let workers come in. You just got to let workers. People should be free to move. I believe that we should have borders. I believe in a secure border. I believe we have a right to know who's coming into the country. I'm okay with that, but it should be, almost Ellis Island style immigration. We have the technology now here's a facial recognition, here's the fingerprints, and no criminal background. All right, welcome to America. Maybe we get a 1-year waiting list just so the infrastructure can keep up with the influx of people. But I'm telling you right now, go with that, along with my elimination of the corporate tax rate. And these people are all going to have jobs. It's not going to be get rid of the corporate tax altogether. And you're going to need millions of immigrants a year because the amount of investment that's going to come flooding in this country would be insane. Nationless wealth is more dangerous than open borders. That's interesting, Casey. You gave me This is I have a new member has joined somebody has jumped into the chat here, Casey Pratt. Labor must be as free to cross borders as capital is free to move. There are capital controls in place. I don't know, I'm not going to get into, I don't know a lot about capital controls. I know you just can't randomly move money around. So there is some control there, whether it's needed or justified is another point. But tell me what nationless wealth is. I like that. Nationless wealth is more dangerous than open borders. I'm curious as to what that means. Type it up for me. Put it in the comment section. This is one of my wealth with no loyalty. I don't think wealth has a lot of loyalty. Capital flows to the, what do we say? Capital flows to where will flow to where it gets the highest rate of return. I don't think there's a lot of wealth loyalty. I guess I'd have to have a conversation with you to understand that better, I guess. What am I at here? I'm over an hour. I don't get over an hour very often, but I will say this. I'm trying to get to 400 likes on this session, and I am only 11 away. So if you're watching this on TikTok and you haven't liked it, please like it, because I'm trying to get to 400 so I can sign off and go to bed. I appreciate you guys sticking around and being in the comment section. I'm not going anywhere until I get to 400. Well, that's not completely true, but I'm going to try and get there anyway. I had one other topic I wanted to hit on. One other news story. Kamala Harris and U.S. Steel. Corn and food. Oh, I wish you guys were here for my corn and food thing. That would have been a good one for you. Hey, I'm at 448. Guys, I'm calling it a night. I'm going to try and do this on a nightly basis. Tomorrow, my nephew has a football game, so it won't be on tomorrow night, but I should be back Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. Get on here about between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, and I go until the animal feed. All right, so I don't know if you could see. Yeah, it's up right here, right? So 97 million acres, U.S. corn. I've been saying we should get rid of the corn subsidies and ethanol mandates forever. So 97 million acres, the largest U.S. crop in the United States. 12% ends up in foods that are either directly consumed or high fructose corn syrup. The rest of it is feed and ethanol. And high fructose corn syrup is terrible for us. It's a part of the obesity epidemic we have in this country, is all this high fructose corn syrup and freaking everything we eat. Corn oil, vegetable oils. And if we weren't subsidizing corn, what would we be using that cropland for instead? Anyway, this is another government intervention in the marketplace where it's like the consequences of this corn thing has been horrible, and it's bad for the environment. It's one of the most resource dependent crops you can grow. It's just a terrible intervention on the government's part into the marketplace. But hey, I've been a little over an hour. I really appreciate everybody who stuck around. I love user 588593919. Get yourself a username and then direct message it to me so that I know what it is, so that we can chat next time I'm on here. I'm heading out. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, please like and share this. And get the word out. There's a guy who talks like a libertarian on the things at night, and he's live streaming. And I'm going to try and add Twitch to this. I'm on YouTube and TikTok right now. I also do this on Facebook. So I try and multi-stream, but I'm a one-person show here. I don't have anybody to help me with the technology or anything. So I'm going to try and add Twitch to it, but it gets to be a lot to manage because I'm not great with the technology. But